Welcome to the Weaver's Way.
Welcome back, Weavers. I'm really glad you're here today. I want to share something that is really personal and sacred to me, which is my ancestor practice. I've had a few comments and discussions with people both here on YouTube and in the community at Jessica and the Moon, where I am the community weaver. And in talking with people, I thought I would love to hear more about their practices, and I wanted to share a little bit about what my practice looks like and how it's been evolving since I started with it more devotedly, and how I hope to deepen it in the rest of the year. I should preface this video first, though, by saying that this isn't a tutorial or a how-to. It's really just a reflection of my practice as it exists now and a little bit about where it's been and where it's going, but in no way is this prescriptive. I really want to be clear that what works for me may not work for you and your ancestors, and it's really just a chance to connect and talk to others who have an interest in having an ancestor practice. So with that said, I also want to include a few remarks at the end about an upcoming workbook that I'm going to be offering for those that are new or looking to deepen their practice with their ancestors, that should launch at the end of this week. So if that interests you, stay for the end of the video. While we're talking, I'm just going to flip through some of the cards. This is the Unfolding Path Tarot, and I use this in connection with my grandmother. So we'll just flip through some of the cards as we're chatting. So the first thing I think that's important to address both in my practice and if you're looking to start or deepen one is why you might want an ancestor practice. For me, it really started with wanting to remember those that I knew while they were alive and stay connected to them even in death, and also to deepen my understanding of where I come from. I think I'm not alone in this. I think a lot of Americans really struggle sometimes in feeling connected to ancestors of long ago, especially because it usually requires a fair amount of genealogy and DNA research to get a sense of where your ancestors immigrated from and why you may have been pulled and connected to cultures that are not actually your own lived experience. And so for that reason, I think ancestor work, especially for North Americans, can feel disconnected. And my ancestor practice started as wanting to connect to ancestors I knew, and the more stories I heard, it developed into wanting to know not only stories of long ago and who those people were, but also part of the reason I feel so connected to this land. And the more I get into it, the more I realize that it's also partly because this land is in my bones. It's been passed down to me for generations in the food we ate and the lives we lived. My people were farmers and land tenders and mothers who lived by the seasons. I grew up with family members who talked about the Farmer's Almanac and the phase of the moon. So for me, my ancestor practice goes hand in hand with my spiritual practice and lines up with a lot of the things my ancestors were doing, even if they wouldn't have called them what I call them. So for that reason, my ancestor practice is deeply connected to my spiritual practice. For you, it may be a little different. Maybe you just want to figure out more about the people that came before you. Maybe it's genealogy work. But I think for me, it was also placing those people in time, learning their stories that connected them to the ancestors that I knew while they were alive. Knowing about great grandparents I never met helped me to understand the patterns and family cycles and dynamics that I inherited or I was impacted by, that really put a lot of my early experiences into greater context. It also gave me a lot of sympathy for the people that I knew that struggled in their lifetime with things that were passed down to them. So it's also been a place of understanding wounds and healing family cycles. And a lot of you that know me and Jessica and the Moon know that I feel deeply connected to being a cycle breaker. And so for that reason, learning small and sometimes large ways that they changed things that they experienced and helped make the next generation healthier and more healed than they themselves had been. So it gave me a lot of context for their actual lives and made them real. And so my practice beyond that has given me even more of a why. And it really does, I think, anchor my sense of connectedness in the web of life and my place in my family's ancestral line, both where I come from, but also the person that I am choosing to be as an ancestor to my descendants to come. I'm a mom. It's inseparable for me to think about the impact I have on the generation that I'm raising, the generation that they will raise, and my placement in that ancestral line. My ancestor practice has also been a major source of support. Getting to know my ancestors who crossed over reminds me of the mother line that I am connected to and the hands that have birthed babies and nursed them when they were sick and walked them down the aisle when they got married. And just as I went to them when they were alive, I go to them now in death across the veil. Sorry. Starting an ancestor practice can be such a solace and a source of comfort to know that they're not gone, they're not lost, and you can connect with them anytime you want. That's a personal gnosis. But I think for those of us that feel that we feel them sometimes or we see signs sometimes, having an ancestor practice helps us to place those experiences in reality. And I think lots of people have had those experiences and then you reflect on it and you think, there's more. I know there's more. I feel it. And so an ancestor practice allows you to connect, to continue to connect with those that you knew and loved when they were alive, and to still connect with them across the veil. Okay, I've got myself together. I'd like to talk a little bit about the practices that I actually engage in with my ancestor practice. And the first thing I'll talk about is communication. This can be listening, asking, sharing, communication with them, both in speaking aloud, in prayer, in tarot. Feels as natural to me as talking to them when I used to sit on their lap as a small child, or calling them up when I moved away for college. And it feels like no time has passed at all. Sometimes it feels like my grandmother is standing right beside me. As much as one could see, right? I say that like, obviously, can't you see her standing right beside me? But it feels that way. It feels like she's right there. So I work with tarot cards and oracle cards. I have a pendulum that I use. I will offer prayer to them, much like some people might pray to saints. I pray for their intercession. I pray for their guidance and wisdom. I pray prayers of thanks for what they've done for me, both in living and in death, in spirit. And I journal with and to them. I send letters. And sometimes I'm just speaking aloud at my altar. And sometimes I'm sitting in silence with a candle and I meditate and just imagine that they're nearby. And it feels true. Sometimes I pull cards and I ask for their clarity or comfort on whatever my question was. And I do engage with my ancestors in terms of communication and spell work and ritual. I evoke them, meaning like I invite them to join me in sacred space or in circle, asking for protection or guidance, support, presence. And I want to be clear, that's different than when people talk about invoking a spirit or inviting it into their body. I don't do that with my ancestors. But I don't wait for ritual moments either. I just talk to them daily. You know, if I'm overwhelmed or when I miss them or something reminds me of them, they really are woven into the fabric of my days and how I spend my time and how I think about things. I just include them in my daily rhythms like I did when they were alive. So the next thing I'll talk about is altars. I have a few altars, but my main one is dedicated to my grandmother. And there I have this piece of decor, some crystals, offerings, her picture, tarot cards, my pendulum, candles, those sorts of things. I also have pictures of my grandfather, my aunt, my older brother, a set of great-grandparents, and a few beloved pets that have crossed over the Rainbow Bridge that I still connect with now in spirit. Each one of the items on my altar is intentional. So whether it's a photo, a keepsake, something that they loved, or represents something that they enjoyed in life, everything on my altar is on purpose. I do have a few smaller altars throughout my home where I invite them to visit, but primarily I ask them to visit when I'm at my altar. I also only invite my grandmother to connect with me for more urgent messages. That is a boundary I set. But in general, I say, unless it's an urgent message, I'll meet you at my altar. That's when we'll connect. And so I do have a bedside altar that is just for my grandmother and my aunt. So it's my way to say like a hello in the morning or a good night at bedtime, maybe pull some cards and light a candle. I'll be honest, when I was in college, I wasn't so great at keeping in touch, and they both only lived a few years after that and after graduate school for me. And so in many ways, my bedside altar serves as a way to show them that I am committed to keeping communication and our relationship going, even though they've crossed over. And so that additional altar offers me a visual reminder and a sacred space to do just that. I leave offerings on my main altar. My grandmother gets a cup of coffee every single morning. If I ever miss a day, it is only one. Even when I go on vacation, I will make her a cup of coffee. And I sometimes will bring candles and things like that with me. But on my main altar, I leave her coffee. Sometimes the other ancestors get a cup of water. And as often as I can, I will light a candle, offer some herbs, and just spend time there remembering and honoring them, especially the ones that I knew, and offering a prayer to the ones that I didn't. So my altar serves as a place of connection and meeting and a chance to demonstrate my commitment to the relationship, even if I don't have anything to say, or even if I don't know what I want to talk about. I just sit and I listen and I let them come through and I invite them to that place. So as much as going to the cemetery can also be a place of altar, of sacred connection and reverence, I don't do as much workings there. My altar in my home is the place where I connect with my ancestors and sometimes do magic or ritual and other types of things that make it more of a true altar as opposed to a shrine. I refresh my altar seasonally, so I'll add new flowers or seasonal foods, decorations, that sort of thing. It's really not symbolic. It is practical, functional, and relational. I tend to it every day. I refresh certain things weekly or monthly or seasonally. And it's really about coming back to it over and over and over again every day as an act of devotion, as an act of connection. And I made a promise when I started on this path with them that I would hold up my end of the bargain. I would show up. I would stay connected, that they would be a part of my everyday life. And so my altar is my demonstration that I'm showing up. So maybe your altar won't be that, or maybe it will be a travel altar that you keep with you, or a astral altar that you keep in your mind's eye on the astral plane and you tend to it there. But altars have formed a foundational piece of my ancestor practice, and I wanted to mention it here. I'm going to flip the deck around and we'll keep moving on. The next part of my practice I want to talk about is offerings and veneration. So this part of my practice is all about giving back to my ancestors, showing them love and respect and reverence. I tend to think about it in frequency or time so that I have an anchor of how often I'm doing something, and I can incorporate it into my calendar and my schedule and my rhythms and in my daily routine. And those of you that know me from Jessica and the Moon will know that perfectly lines up with my astrology as well. Routines, structure, that kind of things. So for that reason, the next section, we're going to talk about things in terms of time. And for this, I really think about my daily practice as offerings like food, like short-term food offerings, water, coffee, occasionally like liquors, and my time. I spend time at my altar. I connect. I visit with my grandmother. I pull cards. I offer a blessing. I ask for her guidance and blessing as well, and protection, and just spend some time connecting. On a weekly basis, it's a little less intense, but I try to make it special. So I will offer something sweet or something special, usually like their favorite candies or chocolate or a sweet treat that I know is a little more shelf stable. My grandmother had some favorite candies that I buy regularly and refresh. On a monthly basis, it's more about maintenance, the bigger stuff. So for me, I go to my altar, I will tidy and clean, wipe things down, refresh the offerings that are still there, especially if they were seasonal offerings. So things like acorns or leaves or flowers that maybe need to be cleared. And then I spend some time with much more intention in prayer, in meditation, and reverence, really taking time to think about my ancestors. I tend to do this either on the first of the month or the new moon of the month, depending on when I have time. But I really take some time to start things off, start the month off with as much reflection as I can, and specifically memories of ancestors that I knew in life, stories that have been passed down to me of those I didn't, and thinking about my connection to them. Sometimes I'll sit and look at an ancestor's photo and wonder what it would be like to talk with them. What do they look like when they're animated in 3D? And what would their voice sound like? What type of voice would they have? Some of my ancestors are from deep Appalachia, and while I'm not, they migrated west over the generations. It wasn't that far back that they did, and have much thicker Southern accents and Appalachian accents than I do. And so I think about that sometimes. When I'm there every month, I'll look at the photos and think, I wonder what your voice sounded like. I wonder what you sounded like when you were happy or sad or mad, when you were Like if I had known you in life, what would it have sounded like when you gave me a hug or said, I love you? And so that reminds me that these are real people that really cared for other people I knew and loved. So it helps to anchor my practice in people, heart-centered space and time. So that monthly part of my practice is really important. Seasonally, I change out decor, and I might leave offerings that are way more shelf stable, like faux flowers or seasonal decor, and specifically things that are related to like holidays or special days on the wheel of the year. This piece here is actually, I got it, I think at like Michael's at Halloween, and I put it there for Samhain, and then I thought, nope, I'm going to keep it there. So this stays permanently, but I have other things that are death and ancestral themed that I put up at certain holidays to mark the thinning of the veil and my connection to them. Annually, it's a bit more active practice. So, and by that I mean on their birthdays and their death days, and then the anniversary of my grandparents' marriage, I go to the cemetery. I will tend to their graves. I'll clean them. And I mean like deep clean. I take brushes and environmentally friendly soaps and water, and I clean them deeply clean my ancestors' gravestones so that they look brand new. And I light candles. And if it's their birthday, we sing happy birthday. And if it's their death day, I take a moment to offer my love and support, and hoping that they're at peace and that they know that they are loved from both sides of the veil. And we light a candle, and I tell my kids stories of them if I knew them, and I take some time to thank them for their role and connection in the family tree, whatever that might have been. And specifically for the ones that helped raise me that have crossed over, I take time to remember that, to remember who they were and all of the memories we shared, the years and years of life that they gave to me to help raise me and shape me. And those annual practices are arguably the deepest and often the most emotional of all of my practices. And so for that reason, I made a note in my notes for this video that I wanted to say it's really important, I think, as you're building your ancestor practice, to think of veneration and offerings and decor as not objects. They are symbols. They are actions of love. It's important that they are representative of the relationship. And so for me, the veneration of my ancestors, the reverence and the telling of their stories is much more about the relationship and the respect and the connection than it is about anything that I'm leaving. When I haven't had a ton of money, I take them what I can afford. I make them something. It doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be, I don't think. My ancestors were not those sort of people who would have expected me to like buy an expensive diamond, family crest or something as an act of appreciation and veneration. They were simple people who cared about food and family and connection and generosity. So sometimes it's as simple as preparing their recipes and telling my kids about favorite family meals or traditions that we had. And more often than not, it's about saying thank you out loud to them for how they've walked with me and how they loved me and how they still shape and guide me in spirit. So veneration and offerings, to me, it's important that I think of them as acts and offerings of love, and that it's not just obligation or out of routine. I really try to stay emotionally connected to the things that I'm doing and offering them. So the last bit I want to talk about is about genealogy and ancestral exploration. I won't spend a lot of time here because I know if you're just starting out, this would be something that would maybe be years into your ancestor practice, to the depth that I'm going to talk about it here. I will say, when you're starting out, just looking into your genealogy within like the most recent few generations, 3 or 4 generations back, is a great place to start. Recording favorite family stories, even as like audio files on your phone, is also a great starting point for working with family lineage. But for this, I want to share a little bit about what I've done in hopes that it might inspire you a little bit. Ah, what a perfect card. I'm going to stop here while I chat about this because the Ten of Pentacles really is about legacy, and that is what this section is for me. So I've done some ancestry research, like building the family tree and finding vital records, learning their names, but I've really made an effort in the last 6 months in particular of moving into deeper territory. I started mapping family traits and cycles and patterns, thinking about the strengths and vices that have been passed down to me or more recent ancestors, thinking about the things that I inherited that I want to keep and the ones I want to let go of. I reflected a lot about the cycles that they contributed to, both positively and negatively. And I spent some time thinking about specifically the ancestors that I knew, about the cycles that they perpetuated, but also, importantly, about the cycles that they tried to break or actually did. I think a lot of previous generations had their own deep traumas. There was a lot of bad things that happened in generations past, and very hard times of deep family and financial depressions, and times when, especially for humble working class folks, times were tough. And so it's been really impactful for me to think about, how did my ancestors choose to be better people? How did they grow? How did they evolve? And how did that impact their kids, the people who raised me? And for that reason, that part of legacy has been really an exceptional part of my practice in the past 6 months, and something I plan to continue to do. But also thinking about stories. So I've been conducting a family oral history with my mom. She is the only relative left of her generation on our side of the family. So the stories that she has are the last surviving remnant of them. So in my effort to preserve those, I have been meeting with her online via Zoom, and so that I can record the messages and the stories and record the details. Eventually, big goal, I want to write a book. I want to make a book for my kids and my nieces that can be passed down to their kids, of the stories of their ancestors, of meaningful moments in our family's history that they can keep forever. And even if they are just more mundane stories, it puts their ancestors into context that they otherwise wouldn't have. And it's an anchoring offering that I can give to them that will situate them in their own family history in a way that a vital record, a birth certificate, a death certificate will not do. So one of my major contributions to my family as an ancestor will be to write this book. I know this part of my practice will be an ongoing endeavor that may take me years, but it's really important to me. And I am really proud of the fact that I've already made it 6 months into the year and had several sessions with my mom of gathering stories and collecting them. And I hope to keep going. So I will say, if this resonates for you, or you are the story keeper of your family, that might be an act of service to your ancestors that you could start, of just writing stories, recording the stories, have a Zoom call with yourself and record that. Audio files, whatever it might be, write down the legacy, good and bad, that you want to be remembered. Because what we remember lives on. And I think that so many of us feel that lack of story, of connection with ancestors, even somewhat recent. And so I would just say, if that calls to you, maybe explore what you can do to get started with that. So the next part of this video is going to be about reflecting on what I've accomplished so far this year and my goals for the second half of the year. The first half of the year taught me a lot. First, I would say I am really proud of how consistent I've been with daily coffee offerings to my grandmother, daily card pulls, checking in, taking a moment to connect and offer blessing, receive blessing and protection, etc. at the ancestral altar, of saying good night and good morning and recording meaningful tarot spreads and other special moments. But in the year to come, I want to go even deeper. So while I'm really proud of what I've accomplished so far in those relationships, my ancestors are calling me deeper, and I want to answer that call. So specifically, some things that I want to do in the coming months is to start doing a ancestor check-in tarot spread every single month in my Moonwise journal. I can't figure out if I want to do it at the new moon or the full moon, or where I'll situate it in time, but I want to start doing a monthly spread that is just for tarot with my ancestors. I already have an existing monthly spread, meaning a 2-page spread, in my journal that I decorate, and I record my ancestor practice in general, notes, goals, plans, that sort of stuff. But this year, or this second half of the year, I want to add a tarot spread as well, to every month. I also want to offer more meditation time at my altar to my ancestors, where I'm not just asking or looking for guidance or inspiration or cards and things, that I'm just sitting and listening and connecting and being open to what they have to say. I do that, as I mentioned, monthly, but I'd really like to start doing it on a more weekly or even daily basis. I also want to start refreshing my altar with the seasons with more intention. So far it's been like small decor pieces or things that I've bought, but I really want to think about making things or collecting them from the land where I live, even if it's just a handful of acorns or plants that I grew in my garden. I'd like to start being more intentional about like the cycles and seasons, and making that part of my altar even more special and personalized. I may even start working on an ancestral herbal blend incense that I will grow the plants myself. So that's kind of it. That's a goal, maybe a little lofty, but I want to get there. And so I'm going to start planning for that. I also want to continue scheduling story interviews with my mom and increase their frequency, so that I can really make the most of the storytelling time I have with her. And finally, I want to continue my visits to the cemetery for their birthdays and death days, and including my kids and myself in those practices. But I'm also branching out into inviting other relatives for these visits and the grave tending, for singing happy birthday, and taking a moment to gather around at the cemetery, around their resting places, and making it about them, and being together the way we would if we were celebrating their birthday in their life. And I think an overall theme is just slowing down, letting the relationships develop and deepen as a part of connection, of daily practice, of returning I really want to find my groove with these practices entering my third year of this more devoted ancestral practice that I have. So if you've made it to this part of the video, thank you. I'm wrapping up now, I promise. I have 2 tips for you though. If you are starting out or want to return to your own ancestor practice, my first tip would be to start small. Maybe it's just 1 candle. Maybe it's writing down 1 story or making 1 offering. Maybe it's just setting aside a small space that you can journal with them, or creating a small offering space on your altar, your existing altar. Whatever it is, my second tip would be, let it be simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be time intensive. It just has to be heartfelt. It has to be connective. And so start small, keep it simple. Those are my 2 big tips if you're just starting out or wanting to return to your practice. If you're looking to deepen your practice, I would say explore what really matters to you and what parts of your practice that you're already doing you can invite your ancestors into. Likely, they're already ready to do that. And it's just about opening the line and keeping the line of communication open. So if you already practice tarot, invite them into your tarot. Make space for them in your spreads. Make time to pull cards with them. If you have a lot more spell work in your practice, invite them to join you in circle. Ask for their participation. Ask for signs in your daily life that support whatever you're doing with your spells, your divination. And then lastly, I mentioned at the beginning of the video that I've been working on a workbook for a little while now, and it's finally ready. I'm so excited. I've been working on this workbook for 3+ months now. And in the last month, I've really been devoting a lot of time and attention to it, and I'm really excited with what it developed into. I really didn't expect it to be as massive as it is. This workbook that I've developed is 30 pages long. It's an act of love and reverence for my ancestors as well. It walks you through a lot of the same things that I considered when I was starting my practice and the things that I've been doing since then to deepen it. So in the workbook, there are things like ideas for building an altar and a consistent practice of developing communication methods and using divination, of acts of veneration and offering like we've talked about here, but even beyond what I do or have done in the past. And a lot of journal prompts, printables. I've got a tarot spread in there if you're just starting out that you can use to connect with your ancestors, that I also think is really good if you're also deepening a practice. But all of this is printable, and you can reprint some of the more workbook or recurring spreads and journal prompts as many times as you want, as many times as you come back to it. I'm going to keep the price point super affordable at just $13 for the entire 30-page workbook. And that's partly because I wanted to make it affordable and something that you will practically and realistically use. Oh, my candle's gone out. My ancestors are like, wrap it up. A great entry point that is accessible to as many people as possible. So it's going to drop this Friday on July 11th, 2025. If you're watching this after that point, just check my website. It'll be listed in the shop, and you can just download it after you make your purchase. I'll drop the link in the description below. If you're not going to be checking back in on my website, though, the best way to know once it's live on my website is to follow my Instagram page and subscribe to my newsletter. I'll be sending out a notice on Instagram and in my YouTube community page and in my newsletter once it's live on Friday, so that you can know that it's there and go download it if you want. I'm also offering some mid-year magic tarot readings. I still have spaces available for those. If you're kind of in the process of a mid-year check-in and maybe might find both together to be a really great combination for yourself. So throwing that out there too. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I hope this has inspired you and given you a lot of food for thought. And not only for your ancestors, but who you are becoming as an ancestor. And as I wrap up, I just want to leave you with this little blessing. May your roots feel strong, and may your ancestors walk beside you in love and guidance. May you find your place in the web of life and let it inspire how you spend your days. With warm Weaver blessings, this has been The Weaver's Way.